What would you do if the man handing you a free sample at the grocery store was actually the founder of the entire chain? No name tag, no welcome party, no one recognized him. Just a quiet man in a plain uniform, standing by the display like any other worker. But what shook him the most wasn't being overlooked. It was the lies, spoken so casually by the very manager he once trusted. And the system he had built with the fire of his youth had quietly turned into a place that sold trust with an expiration date. 12 weeks later, one internal audit brought the entire East region to a halt. One manager was suspended, one store placed under direct supervision, and a new culture was born from someone no one remembered, but who never forgot who he was. This isn't a fictional story, it's true, about how silence, honesty, and one forgotten man changed everything. And if you stay until the end of this video, you'll understand why the way we treat someone without a business card says everything about the culture we've created. Grayson Vale stood still in front of the mirror in a small hotel room in Bridgepoint, Georgia, where he had just arrived from one of the company's main West Coast offices. The face in the mirror no longer looked like the CEO of a multi-million-dollar health food brand. It was that of a light brown-haired man wearing glasses, a slightly wrinkled polo shirt, and an old pair of sneakers. He looked like a temporary employee hired by the company to hand out samples, not the founder of the Core Vital empire. And that was exactly the point. Since Core Vital started with 3 jars of protein powder on a plastic table in a garage in East Atlanta, Grayson had always believed in 2 things: product quality and human integrity. But now, after growing into more than 70 stores across the United States, Grayson felt he had drifted far from those 2 ideals. Not because he wanted to, but because the growth of the system had created distance. He no longer remembered the names of frontline employees. He no longer directly checked inventory. And worst of all, he no longer knew what was really happening behind the polished reports sent from the regional management team. Recently, reports from the Southeast region had raised several red flags. A few refund requests were denied without reason. Member points weren't properly credited. Most notably, one store had been consistently dropping in customer ratings despite its great location, heavy foot traffic, and being under the same manager for the past 3 years. Store number 5, located in Bridgepoint, once a strategic highlight, now a blind spot no one wanted to discuss. Grayson felt something was being hidden, a kind of silence that didn't feel normal, and he decided that the only way to find the truth was to return to the beginning, unseen, quiet, and without the title of CEO. He assumed the alias Ryan, lightly dyed hair, colored contact lenses, and a name-tagless polo shirt. Under a fake HR profile, he became a part-time employee in the product team, assigned to hand out samples of protein bars and new drinks. No one in the Southeast team knew about this. Just a brief email from the communications department stating, "Ryan will assist with sampling for 1 week." He grabbed the plastic sample box, slung the fabric bag over his shoulder, and stepped into store number 1. The first 3 days went smoothly. The Midtown Atlanta store was run by a young manager named Clara, who always checked fridge temperatures, guided customers attentively, and even helped him set up the sample table. In Macon, the team worked in sync, although a bit understaffed. And in Savannah, a cashier named Janelle served 10 customers in 6 minutes without missing a single step in the protocol. Grayson quietly took mental notes. He never liked giving praise face to face, but he knew who would be considered for a raise, who deserved to be trained as a regional manager. Those places gave him peace of mind. But that didn't erase the reports from Bridgepoint. On the 4th day he went there, Bridgepoint was a small but bustling town with a 3-story gym right next to the Core Vital store. Every day, hundreds of people left it with sweat-soaked shirts and bulging muscles. But inside the store, the atmosphere was entirely different. The counter lights were bright but cold. The usual morning playlist was off. Shelves weren't empty, but they weren't tidy either. And when Grayson walked in carrying the sample box, the first person to approach him didn't smile, didn't greet him, just glanced over and said, "You're late." That was Gavin Denton. Grayson had heard of him before. Promoted in his 2nd year thanks to high sales, but also the person with the most cold and unhelpful feedback across the system. HR had issued warnings, but no concrete action had been taken because There hadn't been anything serious enough. Grayson stayed quiet. Sorry, I was told to come this morning. Didn't have much time to prep, he said in a neutral tone. Gavin gave a small nod. Yeah, put it wherever. Just don't block the shelves. And don't explain anything to customers. Just hand them out. They don't care anyway. Grayson nodded, walked toward the entrance where there was more light, and laid out the samples on trays. Within an hour, nearly 40 customers had come by to grab samples. Some asked, does this bar have gluten? Does this drink have caffeine? Why does this one taste a bit sour? Grayson answered most of them. But when a middle-aged man, with a wrapped leg, asked whether the protein powder he was holding came with a 30-day return policy in case it didn't suit him, Grayson turned toward Gavin, and Gavin cut in. No, no returns on powder, even unopened. The answer landed like a nail in the customer's trust. Grayson didn't react. But in his mind, that line wasn't just misinformation. It was a betrayal of the core values he had built. Core Vital existed because it believed consumers deserved to be heard and protected. Every product was refundable within 30 days. Every employee was trained to memorize that fact. But here, Gavin had created his own separate world. Another woman came up to ask why her receipt didn't earn her points. Gavin replied coldly, didn't spend $50. Grayson quietly glanced at her receipt. $62. Not a word from him at that moment. But the reality was becoming clearer. Gavin wasn't just wrong, he was arrogantly wrong. An hour later, a female employee pushed a cart out from the stockroom. Her eyes looked tired, steps swift. Her name tag read, Tasha Monroe. Grayson asked softly, does this store process returns? She hesitated. Number he said company policy is we don't, but I'm not sure. Have customers ever questioned that? Yes, but anyone who argues gets penalized right away. Grayson's stomach twisted, not because of what she said, but because of the calmness in her voice, as if Tasha had already gotten used to living within a broken system where no one listened, no one cared. He kept handing out samples, but his eyes never left Gavin's movements, the looks on customers' faces, the sighs he had once heard in customer service calls. This wasn't just a poorly managed store. It was a symptom of a system that was broken, from the inside out. That evening, Grayson sat alone in his car, still holding the now empty sample box. He stared at the store's lights, white and soulless. A young mother walked out with her son, her face exhausted. A young man with a gym bag paused at the product stand, then shook his head. No one knew the man sitting in the car was the one who had built this place. No one knew he would be coming back. And next time, he'd stay all day. Because one day isn't enough to understand a store, but one afternoon is more than enough to realize something is deeply wrong. Grayson woke up before dawn the next day, his mind still filled with images from the Bridgepoint store. There was something in the air there that made it hard to breathe, not because of the cheap whey protein smell or the incorrectly set air conditioning, but because of the organized indifference. A kind of emotional coldness that didn't stem from job stress, but from silent permission. Here, employees don't need to care about customers. Here, rules are rewritten at whim. Here, kindness has no place. And worse, it seemed everyone had gotten used to it. He decided not to return right away. Instead, he spent the morning visiting two other stores, one in Greenville, one in Ashbury. Both had young, inexperienced teams, but they were full of heart. In Greenville, a blonde girl named Lacey spent 5 minutes debating with a customer just to ensure they received the full rewards from the point system. She wasn't afraid of wasting time. She was only afraid of doing the wrong thing. In Ashbury, an employee named Marcus quietly stepped outside under the noon sun to help an elderly lady carry her box to the car. No one told him to do it. No camera captured it. He just did it because he thought it was the right thing to do. Grayson took careful notes. Every small act, every sincere glance. But in his heart, his thoughts kept drifting back to Bridgepoint, to Gavin's half smile, to Tasha's restrained headshake, to customers walking away in silence as if rejection was something they had long expected. That afternoon, he decided to return. No notice, no email, no scheduled visit. He wanted to see how the store functioned when no one was watching. He walked in just as the shift change ended. Gavin wasn't at the counter. Only a young man was adjusting prices in the BCAA section. Grayson recognized his face from the day before, but hadn't spoken to him. The name tag read, Eli. His eyes were sharp, hands quick, and he moved with the precision of someone who had worked in a busy convenience store. Grayson began setting up the sample trays again, this time featuring a new protein bar line with high omega-3 content. No one asked where he came from. No one checked his employee badge. Customers started coming in. A girl in purple leggings asked about the difference between almond bars and cashew bars. Grayson explained briefly, then directed her to Eli for more details. Eli responded almost instinctively, pulling a nutrition chart from behind the shelf. No one had told him to do that, but he did it anyway. An hour passed. Gavin still hadn't appeared. From behind the stockroom door, Grayson heard music. Not store music. TikTok, laughter, cooking videos. Someone, very likely the highest paid person in the store, was lying in the back, earbuds in, completely detached. A female customer approached the counter, holding a container of creatine. Eli hurried over from the shelf to assist, because Gavin never showed. No apology, no reaction. Grayson checked the time. 74 minutes since he entered. The manager had yet to set foot behind the counter. At 10:13 a.m., Gavin finally emerged. Hoodie disheveled, hair greasy beneath a cap, phone screen glowing in his hand. He walked past Grayson like he wasn't there, didn't look at Eli, didn't greet customers, just leaned against the counter, opened a food delivery app, and mumbled to someone through his earpiece. A customer stood at the register, holding a whey container and a shaker bottle. "I'd like to check out," she said gently. "Got a member code?" Gavin mumbled, not looking up. She read her phone number. He typed. The receipt printed. She asked, "Is this shaker part of the promotion?" Gavin didn't answer, just tossed it in the bag and shoved the receipt at her. "Return policy is still 30 days, right?" she asked again. He paused. "Only if the seal's intact. And promos aren't returnable." "What if I drink it and get stomach pain?" she asked politely. "Well, that's what the samples are for," Gavin replied, eyes unblinking. The woman stayed silent, took the bag and walked away, her steps heavier than when she came. Grayson walked over to Eli and asked softly, "Is he usually at the register?" Eli shook his head. "Only when someone yells. Otherwise, you just saw it." "Anyone else normally in charge? A shift lead or something?" "Tasha's the only reason this place hasn't collapsed. But she's not a lead, just works the most hours." Grayson nodded, jotted another note. He returned to the sample station. A middle-aged man asked about plant-based protein. Grayson personally walked him to the shelf, advised him, answered every question. When the man decided to buy and return to the register, Gavin was gone. Again. Eli rushed back, apologized, and processed the transaction. Grayson asked, "Who trained you on the register?" "Tasha. Gavin never showed me." "What about refunds?" "Just heard the system glitches a lot, so we're told not to worry about it." "You believe that?" Eli looked down at his notebook. "Number. But no one checks anyway." By noon, the store got busy. A group of college students came looking for BCAA drinks. Two gym women discussed the new flavors. Eli handled nearly all of it. Gavin only peeked out to grab snacks from the fridge before vanishing again. At 1:30 p.m., Tasha walked in. Her eyes were tired, but her movements still sharp. She scanned the register, looked at Eli. "How long's he been hiding?" Eli didn't answer, just handed her the inventory scanner. Grayson stepped up. "Hi, I'm Ryan, sent by the company to assist with samples." Tasha smiled, weary but polite. "Ah, saw the email. You picked an interesting store. I think the team here is doing pretty well." She let out a small, joyless chuckle. "We try our best, but it's hard when the highest paid person does the least." "How long's it been like this?" Tasha paused, checked the expiry date on a product box. "Before I even started, people came and went. He didn't train anyone. If someone quit, they quit. No replacements." Grayson nodded. She walked into the stockroom. He kept helping customers. But this time, his eyes didn't leave the quiet instability behind Tasha's gaze. A kind of hope worn thin, but not yet dead. A kind of endurance from someone who once believed in this company, and now clung only to herself. He knew. He had seen. He had confirmed. But what kept him up at night wasn't the fact that Gavin was doing wrong. It was the fact that Gavin had been doing wrong for so long, and no one had done anything. Grayson wondered, how many people like Tasha had he overlooked in the past 3 years? Grayson returned to Bridgepoint on Tuesday morning with a sharper resolve. No more observation, no more speculation. This time was for verification, and if necessary, documentation. He no longer had doubts. At this store, the misalignment wasn't an accident. It was a system that Gavin Denton had created, reinforced and maintained through apathy and laziness. What Grayson didn't yet know was how far it had spread. At 7:48 a.m., the store was still closed, but the lights inside were already on. Grayson stood at the door, holding a tray of new products, cranberry protein bars and matcha tea. Inside, Eli was checking the drink shelves. He looked up and nodded when he saw Grayson. Tasha was logging inventory from the previous day's stock list. No one asked why he came back early. No one needed to. They were used to being ignored by higher-ups. At 8 a.m., the doors opened. Grayson walked in and began setting up the sample table. Gavin wasn't there. Again. Tasha stood at the register, swiping through the touchscreen to check creatine stock. "He's not here yet?" Grayson asked quietly. "His car's in the back," she said. "Probably sleeping in the stockroom." No sarcasm, no frustration, just a statement, as if it were routine. Grayson adjusted the trays, placed a water bottle beside the new protein bar, ready for customer sampling. A few minutes later, an older man walked in. He moved slowly, wore glasses, and held a wrinkled, pale blue loyalty receipt. "I came to ask about my loyalty points," he said in an even tone. "I spent almost $80 last week and didn't see any added." Grayson smiled gently, about to say Gavin could help, but Tasha stepped in. "Let me see your receipt," she said. After a few seconds of scanning, she nodded. "The system recorded the transaction, but no one manually added the points to your account." "So what happens now?" he asked. "I'll add them manually right now," she replied. She typed on the computer. "Takes just 30 seconds. Grayson noticed something. The process was smooth, clear, not a trace of a system bug, as Gavin once claimed. The old man nodded, thanked her, and left. Grayson stepped closer. "Does this happen often?" Tasha looked up and nodded slightly. "Every week." "System error?" "Number not an error. Just, Gavin doesn't want to do it." "And are other employees trained to handle this?" "No one else knows how. Just me." "Why not teach Eli?" "I asked Gavin once, but he said, it's not important." Grayson frowned. He walked over to the promotional signage area. A large poster read, "Core Vital Loyalty Rewards. Earn points automatically with every purchase." In smaller print, "Ask an employee if you have questions about your points." He thought of how many customers, like that elderly man, had walked away believing the company's system was broken. Not because of a software glitch, but because of intentional laziness. At 9:26 a.m., Gavin finally dragged himself out of the stockroom. His eyes were bloodshot, shirt buttons misaligned, and a faint smell of smoke lingered around him. He passed everyone without a word. No greetings, no questions. Just grabbed a box of bars and walked by Grayson like he didn't exist. "Gavin," Grayson called out. He stopped, frowning. "What?" "Which sample are we pushing today? Cranberry or matcha?" Gavin shrugged. "Doesn't matter. They're all the same. No one cares," and walked away. Grayson kept a neutral face, but he made a mental note. Doesn't care about product direction, erases point-of-sale marketing role, cultivates disregard for responsibility. At 10:03, a young woman entered, neatly dressed, carrying a backpack, probably around 28. She walked to the counter with a container of pre-workout. "Hi," she said. "I came by last week. Bought this product, but didn't get any loyalty points. A tall guy in a hoodie told me the system glitched and couldn't process it." "He said that?" Grayson asked. "Yeah." He smiled and said if I wanted to, I could print it and just remember it myself. Tasha overheard and walked over. "Let me see the receipt." She glanced at it, checked a few entries, then typed into the system. "You spent over $50. You should have earned 65 points. I'll add them now." The woman shook her head. "I thought it was a real glitch. Just found out it wasn't. Not a glitch, just a choice to do it or not, Tasha said, eyes still fixed on the screen. Grayson felt something with clarity. Customers weren't walking away because of the products. They walked away because of the feeling of being dismissed. And Gavin planted that feeling every day, with his disengaged stares, careless replies, and his calculated effort to make people think the company didn't value them. That afternoon, Grayson ate quickly in his car, then returned to stand at the sample corner. He watched Tasha handle 3 transactions, watched Eli change discounted product prices without being told, and watched Gavin, sitting in the back, watching soccer on his phone. At 2:40 p.m., an elderly woman walked in holding a receipt from the previous week. I want to return this. It's unopened, but the man here last week said no returns. Grayson stepped forward. Hello, ma'am. It's still sealed? Still has the factory seal. Within 30 days? I bought it 12 days ago. Do you remember who denied you? Tall, wore a hoodie, eyes half closed. Wouldn't even let me finish my sentence. Grayson looked at the receipt, clearly within the return window. He handed it to Tasha. She processed the refund immediately, printed a receipt, apologized, and offered a 10% off coupon for the next visit. The woman smiled and left, but Grayson's eyes stayed on Gavin, who had just come out of the stockroom with a snack bag, completely unaware the customer he had once rejected had just been treated properly. Later that afternoon, Grayson pulled Tasha and Eli outside to the same sidewalk corner where he had stood on his first day. Can I ask you something? Yes. Why haven't either of you ever reported this? Eli looked at Tasha. Tasha replied, Who would listen? HR. HR only accepts reports from managers, and the manager is Gavin. There's no other way? We once called the regional hotline. They said they'd forward it to our direct manager. Grayson nodded. A flawed system. But the fault wasn't only in the structure. It was in the conditioned silence. A place where people were taught that speaking up wouldn't change anything. And over time, they simply stopped speaking. Grayson understood. He looked at both of them and said quietly, I believe you. He didn't reveal who he was. Not yet. But he knew this much. Trust had to begin with one person. And here, no one believed in the system anymore. But they still believed in each other. That was the starting point, and it would also be the beginning of a plan to transform this entire store, from the inside out. On Wednesday, a light wind swept through Bridgepoint, but inside the Core Vital store, the heaviness remained, quiet and unspoken. Grayson arrived earlier than usual, carrying a box of new products from the distribution hub he had personally driven to collect. He wanted to observe the staff's reactions, to see what would happen when someone who represented the brand stepped in and acted responsibly. How would the rest respond? The store hadn't opened yet, but the lights in the stockroom were already on. Tasha was typing something into the POS system, while Eli was relabeling BCAA bottles that had been misplaced. Gavin, unsurprisingly, was nowhere to be seen. Grayson quietly placed the box on the side counter and walked over to Tasha. Any pickup orders this morning? She nodded slightly, eyes still on the screen. 2. One for women's protein, one for an energy bar combo, but yesterday's shipment didn't include the blueberry flavor. Can it be substituted? Yes, if the customer agrees, but policy says we have to call. Who makes the call? Usually, I do. Gavin never does it? She looked up at Grayson like the question was both too innocent and too bitter to require a response. At 9:03, Gavin showed up, shirt wrinkled, hair greasy, iced coffee from the shop across the street in hand. No greetings, no eye contact. Just placed the drink on the counter, unlocked his phone, and began scrolling. A morning shift employee named Kia, only 3 weeks into the job, approached and asked, Hey Gavin, should I update this creatine price label? It's got yesterday's date. Gavin looked up for 1 second. Just leave it. If customers ask, say it hasn't been updated. Then he looked back down. Kia hesitated, glancing around for a second opinion. Grayson gave her a subtle wave. Go ahead. She nervously complied. At 9:40, a woman pushing a stroller walked in. She paused in the pre-workout section, reading the ingredients carefully. Grayson approached to assist. She asked, Is this safe to take while breastfeeding? He replied cautiously, It contains caffeine, so it's best to consult your doctor first. If you'd like a detailed interaction chart, I can print one from the system." She nodded. As he returned to the counter to retrieve the document, Gavin was there, playing with the POS. "Gavin," Grayson called, "where can I print the official product info sheet for a customer?" Gavin didn't look up. "Google it." "I mean the company-issued chart. No one uses that. Too long. Customers don't read it. But I need it." Gavin exhaled and reluctantly pointed to the file cabinet behind the counter. "Bottom drawer. Find it yourself." Grayson found the document and handed it to the customer. She read it carefully, thanked him, and decided not to purchase the pre-workout. Just a bottle of multivitamins. On her way to the register, she whispered, "Thanks for not making me feel dumb." Grayson gave a small smile. The right questions are never dumb. At 10:15, a young man in a delivery uniform came in with a small return shipment. He looked around and said, "I've got a return delivery." Gavin looked up. "We don't accept returns here. Has to go to the central warehouse." "There's a request from the system for this one," the delivery guy said. Gavin shrugged. "I don't know anything about that." "Take it back." Grayson stepped in. "Let me see the order ID." He checked it using a demo tablet account he had specially created for this visit. The request was valid, with a note, "Customer unsatisfied, replacement requested." Gavin shrugged again. "That's someone else's problem." The delivery driver hesitated. Grayson signed for it, told him to leave the package, and documented the incident. He didn't want to escalate it yet, but now the evidence was starting to build. During lunch with fewer customers, Tasha took the opportunity to do a backroom inventory check. Grayson stepped in to help, opening boxes with her. "This protein bar batch has the wrong expiration date," she said. "It should have been the new lot." "Who handles ordering?" "Technically Gavin, but he just copies the old order and sends it. Doesn't check anything." "Ever reported that?" "Yes," HR replied. "We'll escalate to the regional manager." "And you know, the regional manager is close to Gavin." Grayson sat down beside a box. "Can I ask you something? Honestly, why are you still here?" Tasha paused, then answered slowly, "Because I don't believe Gavin will last forever. And because of the customers. Some come back because they remember I helped them. If I leave, I'm not sure who will preserve what's still right." "Ever thought of applying for a higher position?" "Never had the chance. Gavin doesn't nominate anyone. And if the manager doesn't support it, self-nomination goes nowhere." Grayson looked at her, and in that moment, he knew one thing. The most valuable asset in this store wasn't the products or the equipment. It was the woman bending over that carton and people like her, forgotten but carrying everything in silence. By afternoon, foot traffic picked up. Eli returned to the counter from his lunch break. Grayson watched him help a group of college students asking about creatine and BCAA combo packs. He spoke clearly, without fumbling, without showing off. A girl in the group asked, "How long have you worked here?" "A little over 2 months," Eli answered. "Do you know the return policy? If the item's unopened and within 30 days, you can get a refund, except for samples and promos." Grayson stood nearby, listening to every word and noted. Eli knew the rules, but had never been officially trained. Everything he knew, he'd learned by observing Tasha. At 3 p.m., Gavin returned from the stockroom, chewing snacks and yawning. A female customer was waiting at the register. He glanced at the receipt and said, "This can't be returned." "Why?" "Because it's part of a promo." "But I only used one." "It caused an allergic reaction. The other's unopened." "Policy says no returns." "Where does it say that?" "I said it." "That's enough." Grayson stepped in. "I'll take care of this." He reviewed the receipt. The item wasn't on the exclusion list. He processed the refund, apologized, and handed the customer a replacement product info sheet. Gavin stared. "What are you doing?" "Following policy," Grayson replied. "I'm with the product team. I'm authorized to address customer issues if necessary." Gavin scoffed. "Never heard of you." "That makes sense. I've never needed to be heard. Until now." At 5 p.m., the store began to quiet. Grayson stepped outside for a brief phone call. Not to the office, to himself, to record a log of the day's events as a formal report. Concise, clear, with evidence, with grounds for action. He knew what he had to do, but it had to be done right. When he came back in, he saw Tasha cleaning near the front entrance, Eli closing out the register. Gavin had vanished again, without a word. Grayson called them both over. "I'll be staying a few more days," he said, "and I want you two to get ready." "Ready for what?" "For a new store. Not new by signage, but new in the way it operates. And that begins with one thing. We stopped staying silent." Neither of them asked anything else, but for the first time, their eyes held no doubt. Grayson didn't return to the hotel that night. He stayed in the old SUV he had temporarily rented, parked behind the store, under the pretense of keeping a low profile. In front of him was a densely handwritten report, a habit he had kept since his earliest startup days. Everything important must be written down, not just left in his head. There were three main columns: policy violations, neglect of staff, customer experience damage. Under each were bullet points, from Gavin refusing to credit loyalty points, rejecting valid returns, to blatantly dismissing health-related customer questions that should have been answered with care. But what kept Grayson from sleeping wasn't listed in the report. It was the expressions of staff who had grown used to being abandoned, the kind of exhaustion that no longer resisted, the kind of effort that didn't expect rewards, the kind of dedication that never got its name spoken. He wasn't just looking at a store in trouble. He was witnessing a system that produced good people, crushed by the laziness of one man at the top. The next morning, Grayson returned with the internal evaluation sheet he had personally created for field visits like this. Every behavior, every word, every reaction from Gavin was now being logged under criteria: customer impact, cultural impact, frequency of recurrence. From the scores in that chart, Grayson knew one thing for certain. Gavin wasn't just a bad manager. He was a systematic failure model. At 9:02 a.m., Gavin had not shown up. Tasha and Eli had arrived at 8:30, as punctual as always. Kia, the new girl, was learning how to enter discount codes on the POS with Tasha. Grayson brought in fresh product info posters printed at HQ for the new plant-based protein, chocolate mint flavor, and began setting up the sampling table as usual. Today he observed more closely, noting the speed of service, how staff handled unexpected situations, and their reactions to difficult customers. Then just 15 minutes after opening, an elderly woman entered. She was in a wheelchair, holding an old canvas tote with the Core Vital logo from nearly 3 years ago. Clearly a longtime customer. Grayson noticed her lingering by the magnesium section, a product line supporting sleep and circulation. He approached. "Can I assist you with anything?" She smiled. "I just want to know if this interferes with blood pressure medication." Grayson replied carefully. "I'm not a doctor, so I can't say for sure, but if you'd like, I can get the drug interaction chart provided by the company." "Good, because I once asked a young man here, and he told me to Google it." Grayson kept his expression neutral. "I'll get the official sheet right away." He quickly returned with the printed chart and handed it to her. She read carefully, thanked him, and as she left, said softly, "Thank you for listening." But what she didn't say, Grayson still understood. "Thank you for not treating me like I didn't matter." At 10:22, Gavin arrived, chewing snacks, walking past everyone as if they didn't exist. A customer was already waiting at the register. Tasha was busy with a bulk order, so Gavin had no choice but to step in. The customer, a woman in medical scrubs, placed a set of 3 promotional products on the counter. "Hi, I saw the sign that says, 'Buy 2, get 1 free,' right?" Gavin lazily looked up. "Only applies to orders over $75. I bought 3 boxes. Total is $82.50. Number. That's for other products, not this one. But the sign is right above the ones I picked. Probably someone put the sign in the wrong place. I'm not fixing it. You want the deal? Pick something else." The nurse sighed, looked around, and saw Grayson. "Could you check this for me?" Grayson walked over, checked the promotion sign, and confirmed it matched the product she selected. He didn't ask Gavin. He just entered the discount code on the POS and said, "Apologies for the confusion. We'll honor the promotion." Gavin didn't say anything, just muttered something unintelligible. At 11:35, a young woman returned with a partially used collagen container. She looked concerned. I broke out in a rash after using this. Might be an allergy. I'd like to return it or exchange for another line. Gavin, nearby, immediately responded, used items can't be returned. That's the policy. She showed her receipt. I'm still within 30 days. Used is non-refundable. Grayson stepped in, asked to see the receipt, examined the product, and confirmed there was no policy violation. He opened his tablet, checked the official return terms. Everything qualified for a refund. I'll process this return for you, he said. Also, would you like to try the sensitive skin formula? I'll provide a free sample. The girl smiled, visibly relieved. As she walked away, she said, last time, that man made me feel like it was my fault. Grayson didn't respond, but his eyes were on Gavin, who was at the counter tapping his phone, not even looking up. Early afternoon, with fewer customers, Grayson sat with Tasha and Eli in the stockroom. I want to ask you directly, he began. If Gavin didn't show up tomorrow, how would the store run? Tasha answered instantly. Smoother, Eli added, as long as someone can approve orders and open the safe. And daily operations, staff scheduling, fulfillment? I can handle it, Tasha said without hesitation. Grayson nodded and noted, capable of temporary store leadership. Recommend interim lead role. Before leaving the stockroom, he turned back. I want the truth. Why is Gavin still here? Tasha exhaled, showing hesitation for the first time. Because no one asks, and because he knows how to slip through the cracks. He's never done anything outrageous enough to get fired, but enough to make everyone want to leave. Eli added, and because everyone thinks it's someone else's job to deal with. Everyone thinks, not my job. Grayson sat in silence for a long time after that, because it was the bitter truth. No one did anything, not out of malice, but because they thought it wasn't their place. No one acted, because no one had been given the authority. And Gavin had lived comfortably in that gap. But what Grayson decided in that moment was no longer about suspicion. It was about timing. And that timing, he knew, would be tomorrow. Grayson arrived at the store earlier than usual, but not out of habit. He came to end it. In his shirt pocket was a pair of contact lenses he was going to remove. In his hand, a file containing everything he had documented over the past week. Customer complaints about denied rights, detailed logs of every shift Gavin abandoned, notes on loyalty point deceptions, photos of mislabeled price tags and products hidden in the back room, and the employee schedule showing that Tasha worked nearly full-time hours but was still classified as part-time. He was no longer showing up as a sampling representative. Today, he was himself, and for the first time, he wouldn't walk through the door unnoticed. 7:58 a.m. The parking lot was still empty, except for Tasha's familiar hatchback in the corner. She had just stepped out of her car when she saw Grayson standing at the door, arms crossed, no sample tray in hand. Her brow furrowed slightly. You're really early, she said. I need to talk, he replied. Is something wrong? Grayson nodded. Can you get Eli? Both of you, come outside for a moment. Tasha didn't ask questions. She stepped inside, leaving the door ajar. A moment later, she returned with Eli. He was in uniform, hair neatly combed, clearly unaware of what was coming. Grayson looked at them both, then spoke, for the first time without the gentle tone he'd used all week. My name isn't Ryan, and I'm not a sampling employee. He removed his lenses, revealing the familiar eyes that had once appeared on financial news shows and entrepreneurial interviews. Eli blinked. Tasha froze. I'm Grayson Vale. I founded Core Vital, and I've spent the last week here because far too many things are wrong in this store. Tasha exhaled slowly, her eyes never leaving his. I know this might be hard to believe, but I've seen enough. I know who's working, who's holding this place together, and who's been destroying everything we built. Eli stammered, You're really the founder. Grayson nodded, and I owe both of you an apology because I let this go on for too long. Tasha nodded slowly, her lips pressed tight as if holding back tears. We tried to speak up, but no one listened. I know, and I believe you. Grayson opened his bag and handed them each a copy, a list of ignored customer feedback, and a breakdown of Gavin's absenteeism during official shifts. "I've gathered everything, and now it's time to end this." He said no more. He walked into the store, past the counter just like any other day. But this time, no one asked why he was there. Tasha and Eli stood behind him, watching each step. Gavin was in the stockroom, earbuds in, eyes on his phone, feet propped on a box. Grayson pushed the door open. Gavin looked up, irritated. "What the hell? Who told you?" "Don't," Grayson said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut like a freshly sharpened blade. Gavin froze, confused. Grayson stepped forward, each word deliberate. "I'm Grayson Vale. I own this company, and you're fired." A silence so thick it hurt. Gavin opened his mouth but said nothing. Grayson continued. "You've lied to customers about return policies, abandoned your post, ignored your staff and the people we're supposed to serve. You turned this place into your personal fiefdom, where kindness is weakness, service is a hassle, and what was supposed to be a symbol of care has become a stain on the whole system." Gavin stood, hands on hips. "You can't." "I can. And I just did. You're terminated, effective immediately. You can walk out on your own, or I'll have regional HR escort you, but you won't spend another second on this floor. You don't know what it's like to run this place every day. These kids don't know anything. I have to." "Wrong. They've been doing your job for 6 months, and they've kept this store alive while you sat back here watching videos all day." Gavin stepped back. His eyes were confused, angry, but weak. He turned, grabbed his bag, tossed his phone inside, and stormed out the back door. Not once did he look back. Grayson remained still. He didn't chase. He didn't need to, because what mattered wasn't fury. It was justice. Silent, precise, unwavering. He returned to the sales floor. A customer was waiting at the counter, looking around for someone to check her out. Grayson stepped forward. "Sorry for the wait. I'll ring you up." He completed the transaction quickly, carefully, like a seasoned employee. Tasha came over and wiped down the counter. Eli restocked the energy bar display. No one said a word, but every movement felt lighter, as if the room had just shaken off a fine dust that had settled for so long. No one realized how suffocating it had become. A while later, Grayson called them both over. "Starting tomorrow, I'll be here full-time until we're fully back on track. We're not appointing a new manager just yet. Tasha will coordinate shifts. Eli will help with front-of-house operations. And if anything's unclear, we'll figure it out together. No one gets left behind." Tasha nodded, and her eyes held something that looked like trust for the first time. That afternoon, Grayson worked like any other team member. He cleaned fridges, took inventory, logged supply orders. He called the logistics department and asked for a full audit of the past 3 months' delivery schedule. He didn't just want to know what Gavin had done wrong. He wanted to uncover what the system had allowed to slip through. Eli learned how to process returns. Tasha was guided through regional reporting systems. For the first time in years, the little store in Bridgepoint ran the way Core Vital was meant to run. Putting people before profit, listening before brand image, and placing responsibility in the hands of the most decent ones. The day ended with soft golden light spilling across the checkout counter. A gym-clad woman stepped in, her eyes cautious. "I used to come here, but one time I asked about vegan products and got laughed at by an employee." Grayson was behind the counter. "That employee doesn't work here anymore." She nodded. "Good. Are you the manager?" I'm the founder." Her eyebrows rose. "Seriously?" "Seriously. And I'm here because I owe customers a better place." She smiled. "I'll be back." "I hope so. And if anything ever feels wrong, just say it." She left, the door sliding closed behind her. And for the first time in nearly a week, Grayson saw what he had come here to find. A store that wasn't perfect, but honest. A small team, but resilient. A flicker of hope among all the wreckage. And it all began with one man removing the mask, not to show off, but to listen. That morning, no one waited for the alarm. Tasha Monroe arrived 10 minutes earlier than usual. She parked in her usual corner behind the store, turned off the engine, and sat still for a moment before stepping out. Not because she was tired, not because she hesitated, but because today was a different kind of morning. For the first time in months, she didn't have to worry whether Gavin would show up late or whether she'd have to once again carry the weight of three people's work. She didn't know exactly where things were headed, but she knew one thing for certain: the one who had caused the mess was gone. And the man now holding the keys to the store was the same one who had quietly stood at the sampling table for nearly a week, watching, listening, and never ignoring even the smallest act of disrespect. Grayson Vale had arrived before her. He stood at the glass door, clipboard in hand, looking inside as if reviewing the very place he had once built brick by brick. No more polo shirt, no more canvas product bag. Today he wore a simple gray button-down, sleeves rolled up, and a pair of old sneakers, still clean, neat, and ready to work. Tasha walked up. Grayson turned and nodded. "Ready?" "Always ready," she replied. He unlocked the door, flipped on the lights, and handed her the clipboard. "This is the temporary shift schedule for the next 3 days. I want you to check if there's anything that needs adjusting." Tasha glanced at the chart. Her name appeared on most morning shifts. Eli was scheduled every afternoon, and a few new names were listed under pending shift increase. She looked up at him. "You approved Jasmine and Dina for extra shifts?" "They were limited by Gavin for no reason. I believe they deserve a fair chance now. And if they do well, I'll recommend contract upgrades." At 8:35, Eli arrived, still wearing his slightly oversized uniform, but he moved with more purpose, his eyes more alert than usual. When he saw Grayson wiping down the card reader, he paused. "You're actually doing that?" "I told you, I'm staying until this place runs right. That includes cleaning the card machine." Eli chuckled for the first time without any awkwardness. "So what's my role today?" "You'll restock the shelves this morning, then hop on POS from 10 onward. Tasha will handle early customer service. I'll cover back of house and sampling. We'll rotate by rhythm." "Is there a duty sheet?" "There is. And after 3 days, I want you and Tasha to redesign it yourselves. I want the people who know this place best to run it." 9 a.m. The doors opened. Sunlight poured across the clean tile floor, reflecting off a freshly printed promo board. No one said it, but all three of them felt it clearly. The atmosphere had changed. A young mother carrying her baby stepped in, eyes scanning the room as if searching for something familiar. She saw Eli and smiled. "You're still working here?" "Yeah, now I'm also learning inventory management." "Good. Last time I came back, I thought, maybe this store had lost all hope." "Hope's still here. It was just buried under someone who didn't belong." She nodded, picked up a vanilla protein pack, and headed to the counter. At 11:12, a man in a deep red jacket walked in. He seemed familiar with the layout. He went straight to the collagen section, browsed the product line, and then paused. Tasha approached. "Can I help you with something?" "This is my third visit. I had an order placed for the hydrate blend, and the staff said it would arrive this week. That item hasn't arrived yet. Let me check again." She turned toward the stockroom. Grayson stepped up, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "No need. I checked this morning. Gavin never placed that order." Her eyes widened slightly. "So the order was never coming?" "Correct. But I'll have it sent directly to the customer's address. Free of charge." She walked back out and passed on the message. The man looked surprised. "I thought Core Vital had gone downhill, but this time, I'll give it another chance." Grayson walked over to the sampling counter and scribbled a note. Direct feedback. Customer returned after 2 disappointments. Resolved through concrete action, no excuses. He knew these moments weren't just transactions, they were tests. The moments when customers decided whether to trust again or walk away for good. And today they stayed. Early afternoon, a young woman came in holding a printed receipt from last week. "I wanted to ask about this order. I tried to return the item but was refused, even though it was unopened." Tasha took the receipt and checked. "It's fully eligible. Do you remember who refused it?" "I don't remember the name. Tall, skinny guy. Talked like he was too busy to care. He doesn't work here anymore." "I figured. This place doesn't smell like it used to." Grayson processed the refund, printed a discount voucher for her next visit. And then something small happened. The customer didn't leave immediately. She lingered at the counter, looked at the promo board, asked about a new vitamin line, as if she was ready to open up again. At 3:40 p.m., A special guest appeared. Gray shirt, name badge pinned. James Hanley, Regional Compliance. Grayson wasn't surprised. He had called the Regional Oversight Office earlier that week, requesting a possible unannounced inspection. Mr. Hanley entered, scanning the room, greeting no one. Tasha was the first to approach. "Hello, sir. Can I help you?" "I'm looking for the store manager." "There's no official one at the moment." Grayson stepped in. "You can speak directly with me. I'm the founder of Core Vital and currently overseeing this location during restructuring." Hanley raised an eyebrow. "I've received negative reports for 3 straight months, both from customers and internal staff." "I'm aware. And everything you found in those reports, I've seen with my own eyes. The person responsible was terminated yesterday. The system has been corrected. We're retraining from the ground up, and the current team is fully capable." Hanley said nothing. "You're welcome to audit any file, any refund transaction, or speak to any customer here today." Hanley pulled out his notebook and made a single mark. 2-day audit. If there's an issue, I'll follow up. "I look forward to it if necessary," Grayson replied. Hanley left. No thanks. No praise. But Grayson knew those weren't needed. People like Hanley only acknowledge change when they can no longer ignore it. At 6 p.m., as the store prepared to close, Grayson stood near the exit, watching Tasha count the books, Eli clean the POS station, and Jasmine reorganize the energy bar shelves. No one raised their voice. No one acted overly busy. They worked as if the store had always been this way, neat, professional, and fair. But Grayson knew just a week ago, none of them would have dared believe in that. And that's why what he saw tonight, under the final light of the day, was nothing short of a quiet miracle born of real change. No spotlight needed, no grand announcements, just a different kind of morning, where people showed up on time, were heard, and knew that today would not be like yesterday. Grayson arrived at the store the next morning carrying a printed packet containing new internal training forms, a customer interaction evaluation checklist, and a temporary operational proposal for the next 3 weeks. He didn't bring a laptop. He wasn't wearing a dress shirt, and he didn't walk in with the posture of a leader inspecting a branch. Today, he came like a roofer after a storm. No speeches, just presence, work, and a commitment to stay until things were truly secure. Tasha was finishing the incomplete inventory from the previous day. Eli was recording an order number for a shipment that had arrived missing a key item. Jasmine was scanning barcodes incorrectly because Gavin had misapplied labels on an entire batch of whey isolate. Grayson watched all 3 working, and he knew. They had the foundation. They'd just never been given proper guidance. He walked over to the whiteboard behind the counter and wrote in bold, "Retraining starts today." Tasha turned, read the line, and smiled. "Where do we start?" Grayson held up the training board, divided into 3 sections: communication skills, operational procedures, rebuilding customer trust. We're relearning everything, from processing refunds to explaining policies without making the customer feel blamed, from how to answer a health-related question to how to apologize properly, even when it's not our fault. Eli stepped up. "You'll train all of us?" "No," Grayson replied. "I'll start. But after 2 sessions, I want you all to teach it forward to the next group. We're not doing top-down training anymore. We're teaching each other." That morning, they began with a simple exercise: simulate a customer complaint about missing loyalty points. Grayson played the customer, handing Jasmine a receipt missing points. She hesitated. "I think maybe—" "No guessing," Grayson interrupted gently. "Pull the receipt, check the eligibility, review the history. If it qualifies, apply the points. If it doesn't, explain why, with facts. Every second you hesitate, the customer loses trust." Lesson 2. Refund without a receipt. Tasha suggested using the member account lookup. Grayson nodded. "Perfect. And if the system doesn't show the purchase, then call support to verify manually." "Exactly. Customers don't need to know how complicated the process is. They just need to know we're doing everything to help them." Eli practiced positive communication. Grayson threw out a challenge: an angry customer yelling about a denied return. "What do you say?" "First, I apologize for the inconvenience. Then I ask for the details. If it's our fault, I take responsibility and offer a solution. If we can't refund, I still offer an exchange or alternative discount to make it right. Good, but your tone matters too. Don't just be correct, be kind. By noon, the atmosphere had shifted. It was no longer a regular shift. Everyone was learning, and no one felt embarrassed for not knowing. Even Jasmine, the quietest among them, spoke up. What if a customer asks about protein ingredients and there's no label? Asking isn't wrong, Grayson said. The wrong answer is, I don't know. The right one is, let me check that for you. In the afternoon, a middle-aged man came in with a half-used container of creatine. I had stomach pain. Not sure if it's from this, but if possible, I'd like a return. Eli handled it, checked the receipt, verified it was within the return period, asked about symptoms, provided the ingredient interaction chart. I can't confirm this is the cause, but per our policy, if you're not satisfied, we'll issue a refund. Really? The customer asked. Last time, I got kicked out. I'm sorry that happened, and I promise, today will be different. Grayson stood behind, not interfering, just watching, and he knew. They were ready. At 3 p.m., Grayson entered the stockroom Gavin once treated as his personal office, cluttered with snack wrappers everywhere. He started cleaning. No orders. No waiting for help. After a few minutes, Tasha came in with an empty box. I'll help. Then Eli. Then Jasmine. They cleaned like they were purging a memory. What Gavin left behind wasn't just trash. It was the remnants of a failed model. By 4:30, Grayson tossed the last box into the dumpster behind the store. He brushed off his hands. Tomorrow, we'll reorganize the display layout. Based on what? Tasha asked. Real customer feedback. Popular items go at eye level. Low-interest items go to the side shelves. No more layouts that just look good. Eli chimed in. So who draws the new floor plan? You do. I want to see the layout from someone who knows the customers, not someone behind a desk. At 5:15, an older customer returned for the second time that day. She had once been dismissed by Gavin for asking a question during peak hours. Today she came back just to say one thing to Tasha. Thank you for helping me believe this place is still worth trusting. Grayson heard it but didn't step out, because he knew what was needed now wasn't a CEO's applause. It was quiet recognition for those who had kept the store alive in silence. At 6 p.m., as the lights dimmed and the doors locked, Grayson gathered the team for a short debrief. Tomorrow we start phase 2. We're not just fixing problems, we're preventing them. And I want each of you to have the right to speak up. If something's wrong, say it. If something's good, share it. And if one day I'm not here, this place should still run just as well. Tasha asked, You're not staying forever. Number. But I'll stay long enough to make sure that when I leave, you won't need me anymore. That night, Grayson didn't drive straight to the hotel. He sat in his car for a long time, staring at the reflection in the window. No longer the man in disguise handing out samples. No longer the executive signing million-dollar deals. Just a man with dust on his hands, rebuilding a tiny beacon in a neglected corner of the empire he once created. And this time he wasn't building with vision, he was building with trust. Grayson Vale didn't believe in patching holes. He believed in tearing out the rotten wood and rebuilding from scratch. The next morning he walked into the store with a clear mission, to restructure the entire way this place operated. Not just to fix a broken location, but to turn it into a prototype, a version of Core Vital as it should have been, had it not been warped by people like Gavin Denton. From this day forward, Bridgepoint wouldn't just be a repaired branch. It would be the first to pilot shared leadership, transparent internal audits, and bottom-up hiring protocols. In his hands was a printed stack of employee files pulled from the internal system. Those part-time workers who had been quietly excluded from extra shifts, never formally trained, and denied advancement opportunities. He began reviewing each file, looking for names marked limited capacity or insufficient hour commitment, polite terms used by lazy managers to quietly push people out of consideration. And immediately, 3 familiar names surfaced: Jasmine, Elliot, and Dina. Jasmine had been the one wiping shelves the first day he arrived. Quick, meticulous, but always quiet. Elliot had only been scheduled for weekend shifts, even though he was always the first to offer coverage whenever someone called out. Dina, just 19, constantly requested midweek shifts, but had never once received a reply. On paper, these three were ghosts, but Grayson knew, in practice, they were the foundation. At 9 a.m., he called a short meeting before opening hours. "I want to try something new," he said calmly but firmly. "Not based on company directive, based on common sense. If someone is capable, they should be given a chance. Starting today, Jasmine will train to become a closing shift supervisor. Dina will join weekday rotations. Elliot will oversee remote customer support with direct coaching from me." The three stood silent for a moment, as if unsure whether they'd heard correctly. Tasha glanced at Grayson. She didn't smile, but there was a look in her eyes that said, "Finally, someone sees them." That entire day, Jasmine shadowed Tasha through receiving and inventory reporting protocols. Though quiet, she completed tasks faster than expected, spotting an entire batch of vitamins from last month that had never been entered into the system. Dina was assigned to shelf restocking instead of just cleaning, and she was the one who discovered 7 soon-to-expire products pushed to the back. Potential losses for the store, if not rotated out in time. Elliot was given 3 open customer complaints via the internal call line. He phoned each one, clearly explained the situation, apologized sincerely, and invited them to return for a complimentary promotion. No one asked him to do that, but he did it anyway, because for the first time, someone believed he was worth giving real responsibility. Grayson didn't sit in the office. He walked alongside them throughout their shifts, guided them step by step, even picked up the vacuum with Dina when a small spill happened in the protein aisle. One customer saw it all and whispered to Jasmine, "Is that guy a manager?" Jasmine nodded slightly, then softly added, "No, he's the founder." The customer stared. "No way." Jasmine simply replied, "But it's true." In the afternoon, Grayson gathered the group to share something he had never disclosed at any other location. "I was once denied a management role when I worked part-time at a sports gear store. The reason? Lacked leadership presence. But the guy who said that? He never once stood at the register." He looked each person in the eye. "Here, I promise you this. If you have the skill, you'll be given a shot. And if you fail, you'll be taught how to improve. But no one will ever be shut out again just because they don't look like a manager." Their workday ended as the sky dimmed. They left the store quietly, not out of exhaustion, but because they were all processing something unfamiliar. Recognition. Tasha was the first to turn back and ask Grayson, "What about next week's shift schedule? You and Eli will build it." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. And the team will approve it before it gets sent. No regional office review." "Corporate will allow that?" "I am corporate." That sentence lifted the air around them, a kind of lightness from the root. The next day, Grayson began what he considered the most critical part of any reform, rebuilding the store's operating layout. Not with theory, with his feet. He walked every aisle with Elliot and asked, "Which products do customers ask about the most?" "Collagen, then creatine. Which ones get overlooked?" "BCAAS. They're placed too low." "Then move them up tomorrow." "Shouldn't we ask marketing?" "Marketing doesn't man the registers. You do." Tasha suggested a per-shift customer feedback board. Grayson agreed instantly. "Print it out daily. Review it on weekends. If 2 customers complain about the same thing, it's no longer an isolated incident. It's systemic." Dina proposed redesigning the product sample station. "Right now it looks like a leftover corner, not something that invites anyone." "Then redesign it. Draw a layout. We'll test it this weekend." "I've never done anything like that." "Perfect. First attempts are the ones you remember most." 3 days later, a customer who had once been brushed off by Gavin when asking about vegan blends came back. She hesitated at the door. Tasha greeted her. She asked softly, "Gavin's not here anymore, is he?" "Number. And he won't be again." She stepped in, for the first time in 3 months, picking out a 3-product combo without needing a single prompt. As she checked out, she turned to Grayson and said, "This store feels different now, like it can breathe again." Grayson didn't reply immediately. He looked over at Tasha reviewing a printer log, Elliot updating a label, Jasmine wiping the sample table, Dina noting down an order. Then he answered gently, "It doesn't just feel different, it truly is." His name was Leland Voss. He was from the compliance division. No one at the Bridgepoint team had been notified of his arrival. No scheduled email, no courtesy call, no internal memo. At exactly 10:14 a.m., he walked into the store wearing a blue buttoned-up shirt, a dark tie, a black shoulder briefcase, and a badge clipped at his chest. He didn't smile, didn't greet, didn't shake hands. He simply raised his ID, nodded once, and said, "Routine audit. Don't stop your operations," then headed straight toward the front counter. Grayson was in the stockroom with Dina, checking the list of items being returned to the distributor, when Jasmine radioed in, "Compliance man's here." Without blinking, Grayson nodded. He didn't rush to the office, didn't issue any special instructions. Instead, he continued noting batch codes with Dina as if nothing had changed. Because to him, compliance wasn't the problem. It was merely the final test to see if what they were trying to build truly had a backbone. Leland made his rounds, barely saying a word, but his eyes missed nothing. If a label was slightly misaligned, he noted it. If a shelf layout deviated from the region office's standard, he took a photo. If the staff schedule lacked a regional manager's signature, he circled it in red. The silence in the store grew heavy, especially when he stood in front of the refund counter, eyeing the newly posted instructional board that Grayson and Tasha had designed together. A board that didn't exist in the company's original playbook. At 11:27 a.m., he called Jasmine over and asked, "Who approved these templates?" Jasmine didn't look toward Grayson. She simply answered, "The team, with the approval of the acting lead." Name of the lead? Grayson. Last name? Vale. For the first time, Leland looked up. His expression suggested Jasmine had just said something improbable. "Grayson Vale? Yes." "He's overseeing this location?" "Temporarily, yes." Leland immediately headed for the stockroom. The door swung open. Grayson was scanning barcodes on a shipment from the Western distributor. Without turning around, he spoke first. "I assume you just confirmed my name." Leland stopped. "You failed to inform compliance when you began overseeing a retail location." "Because I didn't come to oversee. I came to repair." "And you authorized procedural changes, custom signage, and unauthorized training structures?" "I didn't change them. I updated them. The old processes, regrettably, no longer match the actual working environment." Leland stayed silent. No objection, no endorsement. He simply opened his briefcase and pulled out a 5-page evaluation draft. "I'll need to submit this report to headquarters." "I would hope so." Grayson stepped out of the stockroom and gestured for Leland to follow. They took a walk, not toward the surveillance room or printer station, but past every aisle, where Tasha was helping an elderly customer with a genuine smile, where Elliot was explaining detailed nutritional labels using handouts he created himself, where Jasmine was assisting a foreign shopper in customizing a purchase not found in the catalog. Grayson calmly said, "If all of this is a deviation, maybe the protocol needs reviewing." Leland didn't respond, but he wrote less, walked slower, observed longer. Eventually, he reached the small break nook near the back door, where a simple sign read, "Suggestion box, all voices count." He pulled a folded paper from inside. It read, "Thank you, Ms. Tasha. I don't talk much, but the day my mom scolded me in front of the store, you were the only one who asked if I was okay." Leland placed the paper back in, then said, "I'll need 2 days to consolidate my notes." Grayson nodded. "Next time, if you want to audit culture, don't look at a checklist. Ask the employees. And if you're only looking for scores, send me a template. I'll fill it out for you." 3 days later, Grayson received the compliance report via internal email. The subject line was no surprise: Protocol Deviation Report. But the content was unlike any other compliance document he'd seen before. It read, "Despite non-alignment with official procedures, operational outcomes at Bridgepoint exceed performance standards. On-site personnel exhibit deep understanding of processes and demonstrate adaptive problem-solving. Recommendation: retain current model at this location as a pilot framework." For the first time in years, compliance didn't demand rollback. Grayson printed the report, not to hang in his office, but to pin on the employee board in the back room. Below the report, he taped a handwritten line. The difference doesn't come from breaking rules. It comes from understanding why they existed. Jasmine read it first, then Tasha, then Eli. No one clapped. No one cheered. But every person on the team, those who had once been overlooked, excluded from decisions, knew something profound had occurred. That day, they didn't just pass an audit. They had passed through a system that once didn't believe they were worth auditing. That evening, as Grayson walked out of the store, there was a shift he could feel deep in his chest. Something had changed, not just inside the store, but inside him. From a founder who once stepped back in disappointment over a system governed by metrics and quarterly charts, he now found himself returning, not to control, but to enable others to lead with control. Bridgepoint was no longer just a fixed location. It was a prototype rebuilt with new bones. No longer dependent on the guy in a blazer who knows the numbers, but on the hands that clean shelves, place labels, and welcome customers. Those who understood that true service doesn't begin with a policy. It begins with a look, a listen, and the courage to change what was once assumed unchangeable. The story didn't spread through media. It didn't begin with some grand internal announcement. It started inside, through whispers, soft, unassuming conversations during break time, while folding uniforms, sipping water, or scanning barcodes. That Bridgepoint store, the founders working the counter. Someone would blink. Vale? Grayson Vale? The first person would simply nod. No joke. He's onboarding new hires himself, checks inventory personally, hasn't touched the air-conditioned office. Those whispers drifted into other branches, first to the suburbs in East Hollow, then to the Westlake hub. A few regional managers began fielding new kinds of questions from staff. Why aren't we allowed to work like they do at Bridgepoint? Why are we still stuck with outdated protocols when they're updating theirs? Can we get training like Jasmine and Dina had? At first, the questions were brushed aside, but gradually that became impossible because the staff stopped asking individually. They wrote, they signed, they sent internal memos. The first letter from 11 employees at the San Felipe branch carried just 3 words: "We deserve better." Grayson received a scanned copy from a quiet connection in the internal network. In that letter, the employees detailed how their hours were capped to avoid qualifying for company-sponsored healthcare. They spoke of 9-hour shifts without a break, excused by the rationale of insufficient order volume. They described training sessions that were purely performative, teaching them nothing but how to stay quiet when customers complained. And at the end, they didn't demand raises. They wrote, "We're not asking for the impossible. We just want to work in an environment where people are seen as assets, not expenses." Grayson read the letter, set it down, and quietly told himself, "It's time." The next day, he gathered the Bridgepoint team, not to issue orders, but to ask. His first question: if you were given the power to design a store from scratch, one that's efficient and humane, where would you begin? Elliot raised his hand first. Hiring. We need someone who watches people, not just reads resumes. Paper doesn't tell you who's got heart. Dina added, probation periods should come with real training, not just shadowing someone already worn down by the system. Tasha chimed in, if managers aren't reviewed by the people they manage, no one will ever give honest feedback. Grayson wrote everything down. No edits, no judgment, no condescension. When the meeting ended, he said, I'm taking this with me. Not to the office upstairs, but to the branches. And that's how the listening tour began. No live stream, no PR, just him, an old car, and a list of 9 stores with the highest turnover in the system. At each stop, he didn't introduce himself as the founder. He sat, he listened, he asked questions. Sometimes he shared what Bridgepoint had done, not to brag, but to show there is another way. At store 14, Sweeney Creek, a 42-year-old night shift worker named Marla wept as she described being denied a promotion simply because she couldn't write a slide deck in the company format. Grayson stayed after, handed her a notebook, and said, you don't need PowerPoint. You need to speak in a way people understand. That's leadership. In District 6, an Asian American employee, often mocked behind his back as the barcode robot for being too quiet, stood up for the first time and said, I don't talk much, but I've never once lost a single product in 3 years. Don't I deserve real training too? The room went silent. Then one person clapped, then another, then all of them. At every branch, Grayson left behind an informal document called the Bridgepoint Blueprint. It included 10 core practices, from building shift schedules to how to respond to customer emotion instead of scripts. But most important was the final line. All change proposals must be written by the person who lived the experience and submitted to the system, regardless of job title. Within 3 weeks, corporate received 128 submissions. 112 came from employees who had never been promoted or recognized before. The central office took notice. At an executive board meeting, a new agenda item appeared: the Bridgepoint Ripple. Someone said, if we let employees dictate procedure, the system will collapse. Another asked, is the system stable now? If so, why are people quitting at record numbers? Grayson wasn't in that meeting, but he knew reactions were coming. When the board formally requested a report on the listening tour, he submitted one line: they deserve better, and they're ready to prove it. Attached was a list of 211 signatures from 17 different branches, cashiers, managers, janitors, and security guards alike, declaring, we are ready to be part of the Bridgepoint model and rebuild the places we work in. That weekend, Jasmine passed by the warehouse office and found Grayson pinning a blank white sheet on the board. There were no graphs, no directives, just 5 handwritten words in thick black marker. This is just the start. Jasmine smiled, didn't say a word, but for the first time she stepped forward, placed her hand gently on his shoulder, and said, and we're going with you. Grayson turned, smiled back, and replied softly, no, this time I'm going with you. On the first morning of the new quarter, while other Core Vital stores were scrambling to update KPIs for regional audits, at Bridgepoint, Tasha was guiding a small group of young employees through something they called the internal grand opening, an event they came up with on their own. It didn't exist in any operational manual. There was no red ribbon, no press guests, no official CEO speech. Just an early morning gathering with a new sign quietly hung behind the checkout counter. Bridgepoint isn't a store. It's a shared culture of dignity, courage, and care. Below the message were the names of every staff member, listed alphabetically, not by rank. Grayson stood in the back, at the far end of the nutrition aisle, watching quietly without stepping in. No suit, no clipboard, just a cup of coffee and a still gaze. Today was no longer a day for him to lead. It was a day to learn, because what he once thought was just a pilot model had transformed into a living culture. A small community, but one that was beginning to spread. At Core Vital's central project hub, a new internal platform had just been launched, the Core Culture Hub. It was a place where stores across the system could freely submit operational ideas, customer feedback, and HR initiatives. What made it different was that any idea successfully implemented at one store would be shared across the company, not through the marketing department, but by the person who lived it, using their own everyday language. The first post on the platform came from Jasmine. Its title, How We Got Our Voice Back. In it, she described the journey from nervously whispering to a coworker about changing a shift schedule to eventually leading a full team meeting where they redesigned the entire product distribution flow based on customer behavior. She closed with, I never wanted to lead. I just wanted us to stop losing good people. Turns out, when you stand still long enough to listen, leadership finds you. Within 6 days, the post was shared over 2,000 times internally, surpassing every executive memo from the past 3 years. A week later, Jasmine was invited to join the newly formed Core Vital Culture Council, a board not created by upper management, but assembled from the ground up by store-level employees. None of them held fancy titles, but all had once been excluded from decision-making. Now they were entrusted with rebuilding something the system had lost, the feeling of belonging. An anonymous internal survey was conducted at the end of that month. It asked just one question: how would you describe working at Core Vital? At Bridgepoint, 94% of respondents selected meaningful and respected. The company-wide average was only 37%. A regional manager named Sarah who had previously opposed the Bridgepoint model, sent a voluntary email to headquarters. I used to fear that giving employees too much power would cause chaos. But maybe we never had real control to begin with. What we had was fear, and now I choose to listen. Bridgepoint didn't adopt a new slogan. It didn't launch a rebranding campaign. What emerged was quiet and sustainable change. For example, new hires were no longer called trainees. They were now called builders, because they weren't just learning how to work. They were helping rebuild how work should feel. On a quiet weekend afternoon, when Grayson left the branch to return to headquarters, he didn't take any reports, just a crossbody bag with a worn notebook he'd used over the past 3 months. It didn't contain profit figures. It held quotes like, "I could have done better if someone asked me first. I don't need a title to contribute ideas. The hardest part isn't the task, it's believing I have the right to improve it." These lines would become the foundational text for the next generation of Core Vital, a generation that wouldn't begin with, "What's this month's target?" but rather, "Who are we becoming when we work together?" 1 month later, the board officially approved the Bridgepoint integration plan, a rollout of the model to 20 pilot stores, with a single condition. Every proposed change must be co-signed by at least 2 on-duty frontline employees. Not upper management, not external consultants, the people on the ground. Grayson didn't attend the announcement meeting. He was at a small apartment in the city's southern district, hosting a dinner for Tasha, Elliot, Jasmine, and Dina. It wasn't a celebration, just a simple dinner, soft candles, and a cake Elliot had baked himself. Grayson raised his glass, no mic, no camera crew, and said, "We didn't start over because the system told us to. We did it because we couldn't stand watching good, kind people be treated like they were invisible. And if anyone ever asked what changed everything, it wasn't me. It was all of you." Tasha smiled. Elliot wiped his eyes. Dina nodded, and Jasmine spoke the last words. "And tomorrow we go back to work. Because culture isn't something you hang on a wall. It's something you live every single day." Maybe the most moving part wasn't that Grayson Vale came back, restructured the system, or rewrote a company's culture with nothing more than an old notebook. It's that he didn't do it alone. He was simply the first to listen. The real change came from those who were once dismissed, talked over in meetings, or silenced because they didn't have the right title. They're the ones who prove something simple, but powerful. You don't need a position to be respected. You just need to be recognized as a human being. Maybe you've been in their shoes. Maybe you've worked overtime and no one noticed. Maybe you made a suggestion that got brushed aside. Or maybe you just wanted someone to look at you with fairness. If that's the case, then this story isn't just about Grayson or Jasmine or anyone at Bridgepoint. It's about you. And if a broken system can be rebuilt from the inside out, then maybe, just maybe, we can rewrite how we see each other too. At work, at home, even among strangers. If this story made you feel something, made you warm, made you angry, or simply made you want to listen a little more, leave a comment below. Tell us, were you ever someone in a Bridgepoint of your own? Or did you once witness someone incredible, who just needed to be heard? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, hit subscribe right now. Because sometimes all it takes is one story to help someone stop feeling invisible. Thank you for staying till the end. You're not invisible. We see you and we hear you.